Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Double 18 podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Nagishi. It's Thursday night, and tonight is a special edition. Normally, we talk Chicago Bears with my regular co-host and guest, Rashab Shakiri from the Windy City Productions on YouTube. But tonight, making her return trip for the first time in almost a year.
Yeah.
Taylor Dahl from 1010XL Sports Radio down in Jacksonville, Florida. Taylor, Happy New Year to you, and thanks for joining me. It's been a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, it has. Like you said, right around a year ago, we were pretty much talking very similar things. So,
Yes, indeed. And Taylor, as you can see on the scroll down her at the bottom of the screen, she is the host of SB Nation Making Monsters for the Windy City Gridiron. For those who are familiar with the Windy City Gridiron, she is heavily involved in the Chicago Bears website as well. So please go check it out and follow her work as well. Taylor is very much devoted to the Chicago Bears contents, interviewing the draftees, coaches, parents, and past opponents, etc. So this is going to be a very, very important offseason for the Chicago Bears, and make sure you follow Taylor's work on X and also on SB Nation's Windy City Gridiron.com page. All right, Taylor, let's start with the Bears. Um, Looking back at this past year, 2023, 7-10 finish. Uh, what was your honest opinion on the Bears season? And on a A to F grade level, how would you grade them this past year?
yeah, I think that for me, the word that comes to mind first is inconsistency. And that's just kind of what it was all year. The moment you felt like something was starting to get momentum, another piece would fall apart. And it was kind of that all season and early in the year. First 3-4 weeks, it looked like everything was kind of a disaster. You saw, obviously, it was just the line looked rough, but Tevin wasn't playing yet. You were missing Kyler Gordon to start because he went out week 1. So the defensive backs were immediately banged up. It just didn't really look like Justin had much connection with anybody, really. We were seeing splash plays from DJ Moore, but you really weren't seeing quite what you thought you were in those first few weeks. The run game, you just felt like that wasn't as to where you want the level you wanted it to be. The defensive line looked terrible. There's no pass rush. We were already concerned about that preseason. All of that, you felt like week 5, 6, things started to click in certain aspects, but they never could do it at one time and they never could do it consistently. So I think I would probably, as a whole, if I was just not individually ranking different positions or a side of the ball, I would probably say like a C minus, maybe C. I just think because of those inconsistencies and not being able to do things on both sides of the ball every single game. We talked about the Denver game and how well Justin played, a perfect passer rating in the first half, and they blow that lead, and then you blow a lead against Denver. But then there's other games like the Vikings where the offense couldn't do anything, and you were needing the defense to get 3-4 turnovers a game, and so it just felt like it never clicked all at one time. So to me, it was a very average, but I wouldn't say terrible. I mean, they won 7 games and they were very close. 2-3 other ones were easily could have and should have been wins. In my honest, true opinion, if it wasn't for play calling, the Bears would have won 9 games.
Yeah, I say maybe C plus
Mm-hmm.
for me personally. 7-10, 10-7. It's a flippable coin.
Yeah.
Those 3 games that the 3 double-digit lead, I should say, in the fourth quarter that they blew, really, really came back to haunt us. And then, the 0-4 start still really, really bothers me to this
Yeah.
day. The way they enter the season, it leaves a lot of question marks as to what this coaching staff really did this entire offseason to prepare this team.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand the NFL right now, there's this mindset that, the training camps are, a little bit more lighter. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
they aren't putting a lot of emphasis, and that, most teams are preparing the first 2 or 3 games of the regular season as if it's like an extended version of a training camps. And that's what someone was evident in the NFL this past year. But
Definitely.
for the Bears to start 0-4 is really, really angered a lot of fans, including myself.
Yeah.
And the fact that Matt Eberflus casually, dismissed the 0-4 start is really, really, angered a lot of fans or rubbed them in the wrong way. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I think fans have the right to be mad when you, especially some of the expectations that you had previous in the season. So I feel like what I would say to those people is you can look at even some of the best teams and they were having the same starts. The Bengals really struggled to kick off the season. Honestly, the Chiefs, it took them until these last few weeks before you really even felt like they were playing good football. The Jaguars, same exact thing. They kind of had that late season crash, but in the beginning they started slow too, and people were kind of waiting for them to pick it up. They never did either. There were several teams I feel like that all had that, and maybe it goes back to how training camps are now. Maybe it goes to just there's so much movement in the NFL now. There's so many because of contracts and how much they have to pay people, the free agency and the amount they have to rely on their free agents and the amount they have to rely on their draft picks is I feel like becoming more and more. And because of that, you have majority new offenses or majority new defenses that you're trying to work with. And that's one of the things that really stands out to me with the Bears is I kind of expected a slower start. I didn't expect 0-4. You would hope for a 2-2 or even a 1-3. Because like we said, that one more win would have at least been possibly playoffs for the Bears. But I think that when you have a new weapon and DJ Moore, that's going to take some time to build the connection there. They had two new pieces of the offensive line, in addition to Tevin switching positions again, in addition to trying to figure out Lucas Patrick, Cody Whitehair. So the offensive line was almost an entirety new outside of Braxton Jones. And then you are trying to figure out other pieces of the offense. Because like I said, you have Deontay Foreman, who's new. You lose David Montgomery. There's a lot of newness, and that doesn't just happen overnight. The connection between these guys doesn't just happen overnight, especially like you said, where they're not hitting, they're not running full speed practices. It's very easy. And being to a lot of the Jags practices, I see honestly how lax they are, and it just takes time to build. So I don't think ideally you want a better start, but what you have to hopefully look for, which I'm sure we'll talk about it. We may be resetting again another potentially where it could be a pretty new offense again if we do draft a quarterback, and that I think people need to be a little patient. There's obviously the situations that are a little different. Texans, for example, and CJ Stroud, how quickly they came out and looked good. That is an outlier. That's not a normal thing to happen. I think that is all reliant on a lot of comfortability. Also, probably how much they actually did work together in camp. And that also directly correlates to coaching, which obviously the Bears were lacking in certain areas this last year.
Mm-hmm. So now that it's the off season and a lot of the speculations were being made about Matt Eberflus's future, and I believe almost 2 weeks ago, it was made it clear that Ryan Poles has now officially hitched his professional reputation and his future to Matt Eberflus. So whether we like it or not, and I know I'm, the majority of the people who did not like the idea of Matt Eberflus being brought back, because of the to me, he's so, very, very too casual as a coach, and his, communication styles, and, listening to him talk on the press conferences and, ESPN Chicago's, coaches show, it just doesn't really, inspire confidence. And I think a lot of fans feel the same way as well. Taylor, honest question. What do you like about Eberflus, and what is it that you don't like and you need to see him more moving forward?
Yeah, I personally am probably in the minority of I wasn't upset that Eberflus was staying. I wouldn't have been upset if he left either. Like if he would have left, I would have completely understood, and there's valid reasons for if they would have made that move. But for me, I just think that Uh, Going back to just how the season was, number one, if you rewind and you think about how much the Bears had to do, people think that this rebuild is easy. The Bears had, even before this season, let's go to a year ago, coming out of the season, we were all talking about how the Bears were one of the worst teams in the league. They had a bottom tier roster.
Yeah.
And that was 1 year ago. And so you're not going to completely flip an entire roster and make you be that massively improved. The majority of the time, like I said, there are some teams that are able to just kind of hit it just perfectly to where it plans out that way. But so for me, in that, when there was so much to do, that's already a process. I think number two for me was the kind of mess that was happening. And I don't think we talk enough about how we lost a defensive coordinator very early in the season, and Eberflus was not only having to head coach, but be a defensive play caller and pretty much lead the entire defensive side of the ball while trying to also lead a full football team. And Luke Getsy wasn't doing well, so I'm sure they were trying to figure some things out of how to fix the offense. A lot of new pieces on the team. They were relying on a lot of rookies, third youngest team in the league. So there was a lot of factors to me of why things didn't go probably the way that some people thought they would initially. And maybe some of that blame goes to Eberflus because, he hired this running back coach and he hired this defensive coordinator. He hired the
DC, Alan Williams.
and the running back coach. So it's like, but it wasn't like they were just sucking and got fired. Like, weird things were going on. I don't even know if anybody still really knows the story of what happened with those guys. It was obviously some weird personal stuff. But I think that's a lot. So not only are you now starting with the team who, like I said, is very young, you're trying to just be a head coach and gear that. And now you're also having to do a whole another person's job. There's a reason in the NFL, there's defensive coordinators, offensive coordinators, running back coaches, wide receiver coaches, because it's a lot. It's a lot of work. And each of those guys takes on a lot. And for a head coach to not only have to be a head coach and also be a position coach and also kind of dictate all of these things, I think that was a lot. And he could have made the choice at some point, I'm sure, to maybe bring someone in. I know they brought Phil Snow in at one time, who I think did a phenomenal job. And he's a large part of why I think the defense did turn around. But I also just think he was a part of too of why the defense started looking so good. And we can say that maybe what we saw in press conferences wasn't convincing enough, but I don't know if there's too much to deny of what he was able to do in the locker room. When you would see the videos after the games, they loved Eberflus, and they were, like they felt like they were playing for him also, even in the midst of when you're losing. It was a game 14 straight at one point from 2022 to 2023. And he kept saying, like, just give it some time and we'll start winning some football games. And they did. And they started winning some football games. They went on a stretch where they were 5-2. Other teams would have completely collapsed at that point. They would have been frustrated when people are telling you to trade your quarterback and fire your coach, and here's another tank season, and okay, thank God we have number one. But at no point during the season did I feel like the team gave up, and I think that is a lot on Eberflus. So those are just some of the reasons why I wasn't completely mad. But I do think some things have to change. I think they have to hit on the offensive coordinator. He has to make the right hire this time for that, because obviously Luke Getsy was a big miss. And I think that is probably one of the most important things, because it will take a little bit off of him. But I just think that that's the main thing for me now is you've got to hire better, because we can't do this again. We can't be in another season where we don't trust the offensive coordinator and you're counting on the defense to get multiple turnovers. And it just shouldn't be that way. It should be a more balanced offensive defensive game. That's how the winners are now.
Yeah. I think a lot of things need to be changed. And, Luke Getsy, don't get me wrong, was a useful sacrificial lamb in this case. And I think a lot of people expected, Getsy to be fired. But, you mentioned two coaches that were fired, for human resources issues that we'll never know.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, Eberflus had a say in those interviews and hiring those coaches. So that's a huge, red flag in some ways. And now Eberflus, along with, at least now, Ryan Poles is vetting and getting more involved in the OC search, and we'll get to the OC candidates in a little bit. But Poles has tied himself to Eberflus, and if Eberflus fails, then chances of Poles going down with him, unfortunately, just went up significantly.
Yeah.
And from what I read earlier today, they only interviewed 2 candidates, Getsy and Pep Hamilton, and it only took them about just less than 60 hours in the interview process to get to Luke Getsy, which is unfathomable for a rookie head coach, assumingly with no real strong NFL connections elsewhere. And then I don't know how in the world they even got to the consensus on hiring Luke Getsy, who just basically rode on the coattails of Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback's coach and never, called plays, if I'm not mistaken. So at least I know the bar is set low, especially when it comes to everything, the Chicago Bears do. But I'm just at least glad that they're going after more and more candidates, and that they're at least except one of them is have a great amount of calling plays. So, I just hope that as much as it's important for the the Bears to nail the OC hiring, I do hope that Eberflus has to look at himself in the mirror and change his mindset and philosophy about the football defense. I get really tired of his conservative game calling on the third down, especially. We've seen so many easy completions, couple that with the poor tackling that we saw earlier this year, and then so many just a little bit of a passiveness that I'm seeing from him. This offseason, in my opinion, it's also about the Eberflus having to change his mindset, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think just a couple things, because I going back to the hiring and the connection of Poles and Eberflus. For me, I have like this weird theory about it, to where, because we heard recently within the last 2 weeks that the Bears higher up, Ted Phillips and staff had already narrowed it down to 3, and they were pretty much like, here's your 3 options to Ryan Poles, Eberflus one of those. And that's how Eberflus ended up getting hired. So to me, it was more of like, Ryan Poles didn't have many options in general. He probably went with the guy who he was familiar with a little bit. I knew he had experience. We already thought it was weird that it was a defensive hire when we knew the offense needed to get picked up a little bit. But to me, I almost feel like this is Ryan Poles' way of satisfying the higher up in Chicago, which we know have messed things up before. And a lot of people truly believe that Bears organization isn't going to fully change until things change up top. And I'm one of those people. I think we're going to see some, the not highest level, because it just trickles down from the top. And so for me, I truly think it's kind of Ryan Poles saying, okay, this is a guy that you kind of forced on me. You gave me 3 options and I picked this guy. It's not going so well. It wasn't it wasn't a disaster, but we'll give him 1 more year. But this is your guy. And if this doesn't work this year, next year I get my guy. And that's what I'm hoping a conversation between Ryan Poles and the higher up in the organization went. And because they probably didn't want to just completely clean house. We already mentioned, running back coach, defensive coordinator. Now you got to find an offensive coordinator. And then to also find a head coach. That's just, it's a lot, and it's a lot to focus on, especially maybe they're looking ahead and they're like, we don't know if any candidates right now or somebody worth being head coaching caliber right now. So to me, I just think that Ryan Poles is giving the front office what they want, but I feel like he's made so many good choices that I can't see him just fully riding on Eberflus if he wasn't doing it for some other reasons to satisfy some people. And maybe and this is just all speculation of things that I've gotten out of certain clips that I've heard and stuff like that, of then next year, if it doesn't work, Ryan Poles can say, hey, like, I did it your way, now I'll do it my way. But I do think things have to change. And I think that when you're looking at the way the defense was, I do think some of that's talent. You're missing, I don't think we had every defensive back until like week 13 or 14. They were all injured at some point. Kyler Gordon went out, Jaquan Brisker went out, Eddie Jackson went out. Then we saw Tremaine Edmonds go down for a little bit. We didn't get Montez Sweat, obviously, until week 8. The front was just looked terrible. Javon Dexter, who actually really started coming into his own, that took some weeks because he was a rookie. So I think that there was a lot of things going on in the defense that he really probably wasn't able to do what he truly wanted to do until later in the season. And then we started seeing things pick up. We saw pressures pick up. We saw sacks pick up. We saw interceptions pick up. We saw them holding teams to less points than they were earlier in the season. We saw them being able to stop the run, one of the best run defenses down the stretch in the league. We saw them be able to really kind of temper. And yes, I think the big chunk plays still happen, but I do think that is a little bit of a lack of talent. I think there's still a couple gaps that the Bears need to fill in, and they have the means to do so this offseason. But I do think with that, when you have that next level of talent and you have these guys that are comfortable with each other now, he can be a little more aggressive. He can blitz more. You will see more pressures. And once you start getting to the quarterback, everything else just kind of falls in place. So you obviously need one more pass rusher this offseason too. And then I think we'd be able to see a true Eberflus defense, which we saw in Indy be really, really successful when he was there. And I truly think we could see that. You just have to have the talent there too.
And, we're going to stop talking about Eberflus because it's just never going to end. And one thing that still bothers me to this day about Eberflus, and I made my feelings, on the, the post-game shows in Chicago and on talk shows, is that and I think you might have noticed this as well, that he has a penchant for, not taking or owning up, responsibilities. He always seems to, lay the blame on, the execution, which is on the players. And then my counter argument, and my friends would also say, is that, well, you're the damn head coach. You're the one who's supposed to drill those things down from the, before the season starts and then throughout the regular season, because it's a long 16, 17-week season. And then you're always constantly pointing the blame on the players. I'm actually surprised that the players didn't revolt. And I think it's the credit to probably the leadership and characteristics of our players more so than the coaching itself.
Yeah.
Do you find that similar issues with Eberflus's style, or do you think that at some point, and this is what I meant, he needs to really look at himself in the mirror this off season, that at some point it's going to run its course, and it's not going to end well for Eberflus and the Bears.
Yeah, I think that Eberflus, there was a point in the season where I remember watching a game and just remember thinking, like, this guy's completely lost right now. Like he doesn't know what to do. You can tell he was really flustered. You can tell that the team just looked lost. And I can't remember what week it was. It was probably...
Was it the Chiefs game?
It might have been. I want to say it was probably week 5, 6. So whatever that was.
That was probably, Denver game maybe.
Yeah. I just remember at that point watching him on the sideline and being like, he just looks so overwhelmed. He looks in over his head, which, again, that goes back to lack of surrounding help. The one thing that when you are a head coach, yes, like you hold the majority of the responsibility. And at the end of the day, if somebody's not doing their job, you should be the one to correct certain things. The problem with not having a defensive coordinator is there's nobody in between you. Like he's watching every single position group and handling every single position coach. And then now he also has to directly change things on the defense because he's now the play caller. So I think that overwhelming feeling was through that. Once he got over that hump of being like, okay, this is just going to be my job for the rest of the year, I felt like things started to settle, and it turned from, to me, and this is just things that I've noticed, it turned from the press conferences being like the blame game and honestly kind of mumbly jumbly. Like there was moments in the beginning.
Right. Word salad. Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't even know what he's talking about. He's just trying to like calm people down, I think. And it just wasn't working. It was making people more fired up. I feel like that started to change. And I think it started to change once the defense started playing better, because that was kind of his baby. And now he was able to be like, okay, like everything we're working on in practice that I've been telling them for 5 weeks is finally clicking and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. But I do think a coach has to take responsibility. And I think that at the end of the day, yes, as much as some of it was execution, because we saw missed tackles, we saw pick sixes getting dropped because, they weren't catching the ball. We saw multiple things on both sides of the ball just not be, and that's why I use that word inconsistent in the beginning, but we saw it very inconsistent throughout the season. And as a head coach, it's your job to start correcting those things. And whether you start, a little higher up or go directly to the player, at some point you have to. And at some point you also have to be like, hey, some of this is on me because we're in week 10 and we're still not tackling the way we need to tackle. And I'm a defensive coach and I should be telling these guys, the better way to do it or how to do it. And he has his whole hits mantra, and it felt like that took way too long to start clicking. So I do think it's going to be a very short leash for a lot of people next year if you're not seeing the changes that you want within the first 4 or 5 weeks. I think people are going to turn pretty quickly.
My guest tonight is Taylor Dole from Sports Radio 1010 XL down in Jacksonville, Florida. So, speaking of short leash, my next question is, are you still confident in Ryan Poles, even though he brought back Matt Eberflus?
I am. I'm a big Eberflus. A big Poles fan. I think that you can name a few mistakes that maybe you didn't prefer, and we can go to Chase Claypool being one of them. We could talk about drafting Bayless being another one. And then, people will talk about the coaching hires. That was one of the big points for me for a while was what made you choose Eberflus? When I heard that it was pretty much already narrowed down for him and he didn't really have a whole lot of choices, I give him the benefit of the doubt a little bit. So I don't even put that mark on Ryan Poles personally. The main two for me are Claypool and Bayless. Those are the two mistakes that really stick out to me big time. The rest, I think he's drafted fantastic. I think what he was able to do in free agency last year was fantastic. The DJ Moore now looks like a complete haul with the Panthers. And I think that he's just been able to, with minimal to start. Oh, and this is not even talking about he turned $93 million of dead cap into $850,000. Like, that is massive. And it's so hard to do in 2 years. And Ryan Poles was able to do it. And now you have another season with money to spend. You have another season with a first round pick. And not because you completely sucked, but because he was able to get a haul for this. And when you just look at his draft picks, what Tyreek Stevenson did last year was incredible. What we've seen from Kyler Gordon in 2 years, what we've seen from Brisker, the Cole Kmet contract, everyone was complaining about that. That looks fantastic now. Braxton Jones, Darnell Wright. I could go on and on and on. Javon Dexter. All of these guys, to me, he nailed. And it was positional need and value that he wrapped up in one. And you saw that in the roster in 1 year. Now imagine in 2 years seeing these guys, in year 2, 3 together, being able to play even more cohesively and having even more weapons. And I truly am a Ryan Poles believer. I think that he's been able to do a lot with the Bears, and that goes beyond even the football field. The guys love him, and that's something you can tell.
Right. And again, tying yourself to, Matt Eberflus. Obviously, the stakes are never been more higher for him. This is year 3 of the rebuild, and considering that the Texans with first-year head coach, coordinators, and a rookie quarterback went from 3-13-1 in 2022 to 10-7 to win the AFC South. I know it hurts to hear about that, because you live in Jacksonville, and the Jags unfortunately did not make it to the playoffs. So I understand that's somewhat of an outlier, but having passed on CJ Stroud and then, watch a rookie just completely take the league by storm, and then, and playing in the Saturday's, AFC, playoffs, it does kind of leave a bitter feeling, amongst the Bears fans. So, this offseason, he cannot really half-ass this rebuilding. He can't wait until maybe the year after and say, okay, well, there's a better talent. better group of receivers or quarterbacks or defensive linemen than this year's draft class. There, he can't leave any stones unturned. If you want Eberflus to succeed, you really, really need to fill all the holes that you still have on this roster. Centers, wide receivers, number 2, interior lineman depth, and then maybe another 3 technique and edge rushers and a safety. There are a lot of holes this team still has in. And we'll get to the quarterback in a little bit, but quarterback alone isn't going to magically change this team into a contender yet. So I hope that Poles isn't being too overly confident in Eberflus as well as the direction of the ball club. So I want Poles to really, really approach this offseason with more sense of urgency now.
Yeah, I think that the Bears and Texans were in a very different position, though. When Ryan Poles took over Chicago, there was, I want to say, 60 to 65% of the roster was hitting free agency. The Bears had like $10 million. They didn't have a first-round draft pick because the former regime traded everything away. They only had 5 picks total. That first year was almost, don't even count it. The Texans were just in such a different position because they already had some building blocks on offense and defense. They needed to fill a few holes. They nailed it with CJ Stroud, but nobody was telling the Bears to go get CJ Stroud. They were telling the Bears to go get Bryce Young, and that looks like Ryan Poles. They want to focus that he didn't take CJ Stroud, but not focus that he didn't cave in and take Bryce Young like everyone was telling the Bears to do. People were saying trade Justin Fields and draft Bryce Young. That was what we were hearing this time off season. And there was a few sprinkles in there if CJ Stroud was better, but the majority, I did a lot of podcasts and every single one was like, take Bryce Young. And that looks like he avoided a disaster. So I think that they were just in very different positions. And then the Texans were able to have a monster draft because they could trade back. They end up being able to get Will Anderson and a quarterback because of what they were able to do at the top because they had draft picks to do it. Ryan Poles didn't have a first-round draft pick the first season he was with the Bears, and then literally had to tank to be able to get to where they were last year. So it's just so different, and it's so hard to compare team to team like that. Everyone has different, because how deep their former regime got them are, unfortunately, the Bears, Ryan Pace, and Nagy and that former regime built the Bears in such a deep hole that it was never going to be a year or two fix. It was always going to be a more like a 4-year fix. That's just how deep they got the Bears into some mess. So that comparison, it just doesn't quite connect. And especially like I cover the AFC South too, and I've watched what the Texans have kind of done these last few years, and they were almost for several of, honestly, the last few years with Deshaun Watson, they were successful. They had consistent, successful years. And with that, they were able to build some other things. And then they trade Deshaun Watson for an absolute haul, and they're able to fix their football team a little bit faster. We unfortunately didn't have a quarterback to where we could trade for multiple draft picks and take away all of our dead cap. We didn't have the fortunate side of that the Texans had to be able to build a little faster.
Yeah, my apologies. I had to mute myself because I've been dealing with a cold, so
it's okay.
I apologize there. But let's get to the most important conversations on the minds of Chicago Bears fans right now. The hiring of OC and DC. There are plenty of candidates that the Bears are interviewing, and I know a lot of people scoffed or laughed off when they said that the phones are ringing off the hook. But it seems as though we spoke earlier when we began the show that they're doing their due diligence after blowing the initial hiring. Mm-hmm. So what stood out to you so far, and who is your favorite amongst the candidates the Bears have interviewed so far?
Yeah, I think a few things stand out. Number one, they've gone very heavy in the Shanahan-McVay tree, which rightfully so. The coaches that come off of both of the trees of them have been successful, and they've been able to find success in many levels, many teams, all sorts of defense, offense, everywhere. So that's one thing that I really like. Another thing I've noticed is that they are also, it seems, interviewing coaches that would be fitting for multiple quarterbacks and not just one. It's not like they're interviewing guys that are making us think it's Justin Fields, or interviewing guys that think it's going to be Caleb Williams or Drake May. They're interviewing guys, and I think this is part of the process, because in this process, not only are they looking for an OC, but they're also looking on like true opinions of guys that are familiar with Caleb and familiar with Drake and familiar with Justin, to get their opinions on that too, because the Bears are in a very odd but fortunate position. Honestly, they have a quarterback that they have seen success from, that they feel like could continue to develop and be successful, but they also, in the palm of their hands, have potentially two guys that are talked about as top talent quarterbacks coming out in the best quarterback draft that we've had in a long time. The Bears have the number 1 pick, and not because, like I said, of the Bears being bad, but because of the Panthers and Ryan Poles trade. So obviously they've had 9. I'll just go through some of my thoughts on some of them. I think Greg Roman was one that a lot of people initially kind of started talking about. He's the former Ravens offensive coordinator. He was with them for 4 seasons. During that time, it was Lamar's MVP season, which I think is the main thing that sticks out to a lot of people, because that season, Lamar not only had an insane amount of passing yards and passing touchdowns and minimal interceptions, he also was able to use his legs and score a ton of touchdowns, get the yards that way. He had an incredible season. And, it's not always directly correlated to the offensive coordinator, to certain people, but Greg Roman was a part of that offense. He is very run heavy, offensive minded type of guy. So that's something you have to think about when you're talking about Greg Roman. Is it seems like that one's geared a little more towards Justin Fields. Because that's something that Getsy truly lacked, is being able to find a way to make the offense successful with Justin's legs implemented with it. Shane Waldron, I think, is one of the favorites for a lot of people. Obviously, the Seattle offensive coordinator. I like him. When I first heard it, I was like, heck yes, because I think a lot of people look at what the work he's done with Geno Smith and the pretty much resurgence of Geno Smith's career that he's been able to do. Even this last year when Geno went out, Drew Lock came in, and he was able to run that offense pretty efficiently and smoothly. And these are 2 quarterbacks that people have just completely written off, and he was able to find some success. I personally correlate that a lot with Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll, to me, is a big quarterback guy, and you saw at USC what he was able to do. You saw what he was able to do with Russ, and now that Russ isn't with him, how that kind of falls off. So I'm interested how much was actually Shane Waldron. And when you look at their offenses in the 3 years he was there, they ranked 16th, 10th, and 17th. Not exactly in the scoring offense, not exactly where you want the Bears to land if you're looking at that. And that's with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf and a lot of weapons over there in Seattle. So take that as how you want it. I think there's a lot of positives in Waldron, but I also think there's some possible little red flags in there. Clint Kubiak, I think he's one of my favorite personal ones. San Francisco passing game coordinator. He was previously with the Vikings, and this is one thing that I need the Bears to hire someone who has been an offensive coordinator and who has called plays. I think that is extremely important, because we saw this last year, the lack of that, what it did. We need experience on the offensive side of the ball, no matter if it's Justin or Caleb or Drake. You need a coordinator that's going to be able to go out there and have experience and be confident in that. So he was the Vikings offensive coordinator in 2021, which was the Pro Bowl year for Kirk Cousins. He had 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions that year. And I think that was one of the seasons where people was like, man, like Kirk looks pretty good this season. And Kubiak was the offensive coordinator that year. So very strong offensive minded guy, Shanahan guy. And then you look at San Francisco and what he's been able to do with Brock Purdy. I think Brock Purdy is a major game manager, which isn't a bad thing. That works. We've seen it in Jimmy Garoppolo's. We've seen it in Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff's. I think those are all game manager type of guys, and that's Brock Purdy. And he also has Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey and Kittle and every weapon you could possibly want, Brandon Ayuk. So that definitely helps. But I think that what you were able to do with the 7th round quarterback coming in and being able to get him so comfortable in an offense and not be a fluke, which last year a lot of people were like, no way, this is real. And it looks like it's real. He's a big part of that. So he's one of the ones that I have majorly starred of who I would like for the Bears. Another one, obviously, Zach Robinson. That was a recent one we heard about. Another one I personally have starred. The only flaw on this one is he would be he's a first-time offensive coordinator. He's the Rams QB coach. Rams passing game coordinator. So all of that he's kind of in control of, which I think is something the Bears fans need to look at, because you do want, and you guys know, you watch the games of how miserable certain plays looked, where you were just like, why are we not getting down? Why are we using the middle of the field? Why aren't we spreading the ball out this way? Why aren't we getting to the flat in certain aspects? Why do we feel like it was the same repetitive screen pass, and then Justin having to panic run? And that's what it felt like. Zach Robinson's really good at coordinating these things, and we've seen with the Rams this year, Puka Nacua had one of the most amazing rookie seasons of a wide receiver, and that's with Matthew Stafford, and they're learning each other, and Zach Robinson was able to get them to connect and click even when Cooper Kupp was not in. People thought when he got out, it was just going to be a disaster there, and they were really able to just keep rolling that offense, and it was really fun to watch. So that's an interesting one. Like I said, the red flag there is he would be a first-time offensive coordinator, and that's a little scary. Marcus Brady, he's Philly's senior offensive assistant. He is part of Frank Reich's staff in Indy, which is an interesting one. For 2018, 2019, 2020, he was part of that offensive staff there, and then he was the OC in 21, 22. So he spent a lot of time there. That one is weird to me. I didn't love Indy's offense during that time. I think that when he left, the offense got better. That's always it's a bit alarming to me. He worked with Eberflus. To me, this is a familiar one, and I don't trust that.
Right.
I don't trust it.
Yeah.
He is
no Frank Wright or any influence of Frank Wright.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah. So him and Roman are the only two that are not from the Shanahan McVay tree. Also, so if you are the big fan of getting a Shanahan or McVay guy, you don't want Greg Roman and you don't want Marcus Brady. But the one today, Cliff Kingsbury, I'm personally not the biggest fan of. I've seen both sides. I've seen people go absolutely crazy over it. I've seen other people say, heck no, get away. He's offensive analyst at USC. So he's been working with Caleb Williams all year. Some people are like, okay, this is a strong indicator they're drafting Caleb Williams. Maybe. Maybe they just want to also, in addition to interviewing an offensive coordinator, get to know Caleb Williams and figure out like, hey, should we draft this guy? And I think it's probably a combo. It's, two birds, one stone type of thing. But Kingsbury he helped Murray win Heisman, he offensive rookie of the year and 3 Pro Bowls during the time he was coaching him. He was part of the development of Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech. He was part of the development of Manziel and his Heisman run. So he does have some quarterbacks under his tree that he's really helped be successful at certain times in their career. But then there's just other things to me that make me very hesitant. And I think that some of that is just the way we saw the development fall off so much with Kyler Murray is alarming.
Yes, it is.
So another one, I think a couple more that were on the list, Thomas Brown, Panthers offensive coordinator. This one is really interesting to me. And people immediately are like, what? Panthers offense sucked. But Panthers offense had probably one of the worst offensive lines in the league. Rookie quarterback. They had no weapons. He was thrown to DJ Chark and whoever else was out there. I think Thielen was out there. But when you're looking at that offense, you felt like it was had no life. There were certain games, and the Bears saw it. We saw how miserable that game was. There was a lot of low-scoring games, but the NFLPA did vote him the second best offensive coordinator in the league. So there's something there that the Players Association really like, and maybe they're seeing like, hey, despite all of these problems with the offensive line and with no weapons and with the rookie quarterback, they were still be able to find some efficiency. We saw what they did with Green Bay. You're able to score 30 on Green Bay. So maybe that's what it is. That one is interesting. I don't love it, though. He also didn't start play calling until week 7 this last year. That's another thing. So when you saw the offense kind of start to flip after the bye week, it was a lot on him. And the final one was Greg Olsen, QB coach in Seattle. Another interesting one because, like I said, Seattle was just – there's so much there to work with outside of the quarterback, in my opinion. I feel like it'd be hard to not at least find some sort of success. And when I know a lot of people, Greg Olson, he's also familiar in Chicago. He used to be, he used to work in the Chicago, it's not the tight end, but he used to
Yeah.
obviously be a part of the Chicago staff. He has a lot of offensive coordinator experience, Lions, Rams, Tampa, Raiders. He was here in Jacksonville, Blake Bortles' rookie season, who it wasn't phenomenal, but he definitely was able to develop Blake Bortles and help Blake Bortles get to the point where the next year they were starting to talk about playoffs, and 2 years later they were in the next year they went to the AFC championship game. So there's something there, but Blake Bortles fell off after that. So I think there's a lot of good names. I think that I like how they are mixing it up. I like how they're getting different type of play callers. I like how they're really heavy in the Shanahan-McVay tree. But I think the two that stick out to me the most is either Kubiak or Zach Robinson. And Waldron, those three are the three that I like. I named some red flags there, but I think those to me are the top candidates, and probably Kubiak at 1.
Yeah, there's reports out that the Bears are actually going to interview Cliff Kingsbury for the OC job in LA tomorrow. Now, do you find that to be odd, or do you feel like this is just smoke and mirror, and that there's really nothing to be worried about, or should the Bears fans be really, really worried about this?
Yeah, I'm definitely not the Kingsbury. I'm not a fan of that one.
Yeah.
Like I said, I do think it may be a little more of a side job for them too. Getting some of those questions in about Caleb, but it also, I mean, maybe they want a guy who has some 3-4 different quarterbacks under his belt. I also think he worked with Baker for a little bit too before Baker transferred. So a lot of quarterbacks under his belt that he has found success with. Now, all of those didn't go on to be top quarterbacks in the league, other than Patrick Mahomes. But I think there's a lot of experience there. So maybe they see that and like that. Personally, I don't love that one.
Yeah, I hope it's just nothing serious. And I understand that why couldn't he pay his way to fly up to Chicago or something, or meet somewhere in the middle? So
yeah,
I hope it's nothing serious. But of all the candidates that we just discussed, who is your favorite? I'm going to say mine is either Waldron or Kubiak.
mm-hmm.
And then of all the the coaching interview candidates that they've conducted, I can see maybe 2 or 3 being plucked out for other offensive jobs if they want to join the Bears, or if they don't feel slighted for being overlooked for the OC position. Who's your favorite?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I think Kubiak is my first. I'm with you. I think Kubiak, Waldron, and Zach Robinson are my 3, and probably in that order. I would probably have Zach Robinson higher, honestly, maybe even number 1 on my list if he had offensive coordinator
experience. Yes.
But a QB coach, I don't love that. Like I said, I want somebody with experience, but that could be someone like you're mentioning, like maybe he would be another positional type coach because he is the QB coach there. Maybe he'll be, come and be the passing game coordinator, and they hire him and Kubiak and they come together. And it's something like that, because there are some of the guys who aren't OCs, and for them, maybe they would do a direct slide to their position group, but most won't, unless they're just not happy where they are. But it's going to be interesting. And I feel like we'll probably know sooner rather than later, because they also have to start looking for a DC.
Exactly. And there are more and more teams start to, hire head coaches.
Yeah.
And that once they hire a head coach, then the next logical option is to start looking for assistants and coordinators. So if the Bears want to make up their mind, they better make it up fast. So hopefully, Friday typically is like a news dump. So I don't know how late the interview process is going to be in LA with Cliff Kingsbury. So we might not know the answer till maybe Monday, or maybe even during this weekend when NFL playoffs is on the minds of everybody. So we shall wait and see. Who do you think they will hire for DC? I would probably say they would just probably go somebody internally, because I
Yeah.
don't think they don't want to hurt the of Matt Eberflus.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to say Mike Borgonzi. He was chosen as the DC for, I believe, is a All-Star game, East-West Shrine game, I believe.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's going to get a good taste of that one, in the upcoming, bowl game, college All-Star game.
Mm-hmm.
Or Phil Snow, who was the analyst that helped spur the Bears improvements on defense. He could be the guy. Those are the twos that I could think of, just to try and keep it in house.
Yeah.
But as a DC, Eberflus will still have his own influence, and hopefully with a better talent, I hope that we don't have to see the same old Tampa 2, where we get to, get frustrated with a bunch of, easy completions on third downs and stuff like that next year. So we shall see, because right now I do believe that the OC is on the mind of everybody, and they have to get that one right.
Yeah.
And will have to happen sooner rather than later. So a couple more segments with Taylor Dahl from 1010 XL down in Jacksonville, joining us to talk about the Chicago Bears off season. So obviously the biggest dilemma right now is, should the Bears draft a quarterback in the first round? And I think, a lot of people are, really taking sides, Caleb, or, keeping Justin and all of this. So let's start with this question. Are you on the side of whether they should run it back with Justin Fields next year? Or you're like, I want to see a new quarterback, and let's run it back. Let's run with Caleb Williams. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, I'm very pro Justin, and I've been very vocal about that. But I'm not one of the people who are like devastated to think about drafting a quarterback. I think it's a good problem to have. I think that another year, Justin Fields, we could be talking about him being a top quarterback in the league. I think I've seen a lot of progress in everything we've asked him to progress in. And unfortunately, with a never-ending revolving door of offensive linemen, because we couldn't stay healthy last season, it just wasn't quite the line we thought we could have. When they were all healthy, it looked good. I also think the drop-off between DJ Moore and Darnell Mooney really, really shined this last season. And I love Darnell Mooney, but I do think whatever that lack of connection is between him and Justin, which is really odd because they're very close off the field. Like, they're good friends. And so usually that transfers to a connection on the field, but for some reason it's not. He loves DJ Moore and he loves Cole Kmet, and we saw that a ton. And so I think adding another, whether it's a Marvin Harrison or a Neighbors or a Dunze, one of those guys, and just having that second tier, that number 2 wide receiver that is still close to, if not what DJ Moore is, I think could be really important. But I completely get people wanting to move on. I think that this is year 4. There's contract stuff you have to start talking about, which obviously plays into it. I think that there were still obvious issues that were the same ones that we kept seeing over and over: the holding the ball too long, fumbling, not holding on to the ball. Interceptions did go down, so that's good. But there's issues, and I think some of that goes into Luke Getsy. I think some of that goes into not having like the top end talent. But I do think some of that's Justin. And I just did an interview actually on Making Monsters last week with this guy named Eric Eager, who works for Sumer Sports. And Sumer Sports is similar to PFF, except they focus more on like roster building, roster management, help, stuff like that. So they work a lot with GMs. And he kind of just mentioned, and it really started making me think that Justin Fields was the same in college. What we've seen from Justin Fields is the same as what he was at Ohio State. He did hold the ball too long. His sack ratio was high because he held the ball too long, because he tried to make those big plays, and he never wanted the 4 or 5 yards. He wanted the 10, 15, 20 yards. And sometimes that came back to hurt him. And Eric said, whoever drafted the Justin Fields knew they needed a top offensive line in the league for him to be successful. And the problem is the Bears didn't do that. They didn't have a line that year, probably two back-to-back years with the worst line. This year was a little bit improved in certain aspects, but so I get it. But I also think that when you're looking at guys like Caleb Williams, and every single person I've talked to, Caleb Williams and Drake May, every single person I've talked to, and this is draft analysts, this is guys from Draft Network, this is Pac-12 guys, ACC guys, just college football guys, coaches, QB coaches, all of them are like Drake May and Caleb Williams. Unless something absolutely crazy happens and they end up being some wild bust that are like a miracle, they're going to be good. These are two of the top prospects we've seen a long time coming into the NFL with not a lot of downside. And a lot of times you hear like, okay, they're really good at this, and this, but they're going to have to get better at this. Everybody I've talked to can maybe list one or two things tops that maybe they'll need to work on, but a list of 50 things that they're both really good at. So it makes you excited because it's like in my head, I either get to keep Justin Fields, who I do feel like will continue to develop and get better, or I do get a brand new quarterback who everyone's telling me is going to be a guy. We'll see if that pans out. It's different in the NFL, but so it's an exciting place to be.
Mm-hmm. So my feeling is, I'm fine with either one. I'm not going to, give up being a Bears fan if they trade away, Justin Fields. And, if they want to start new, that's Ryan Poles' choice. But, pairing a rookie quarterback and a, conservative defensive coach who is a lame duck doesn't sit well with me nor any fans, because we've seen this, dog and pony show play out before, when Ryan Pace paired Trubisky and John Fox and Justin Fields and Matt Nagy, only to be fired the next year. So, I don't want Poles to be making that same mistake again, just because he wants to move on from Eberflus and, supposedly, get his own guy. So that will, that's probably up to, Warren, because Warren hired neither Eberflus nor Poles. So, maybe Warren has a different mind of his own as well, because he wants to, be involved in the football operations as well, as it was reported this off season. So, and the other thing about Caleb is that, there's a possibility that, he and his handlers could pull off a John Elway or Eli Manning still, in my opinion. Now, he's from Washington, D.C., and obviously he can't openly say, I want to be traded to Washington, D.C. That would be considered tampering.
Yeah.
But he could still force that kind of, influence. And ironically, Washington is drafting number 2 right behind Chicago. So, there could be some discussions down the road. And this is where the obviously the interview process is going to be huge, involving Caleb Williams, Ryan Poles, and of course Matt Eberflus. And I know a lot of cynics would say, well, we can't trust Eberflus because of his awkward communications and the fact that the coaches that he interviewed in the past got fired or had to resign in a very suspicious situations. So I'm very curious to see how that plays out. And Washington has a new ownership in Josh Harris, and one thing people are overlooking is Magic Johnson. He's from LA. We all know his story. The Lakers legend, a very successful entrepreneur, still has, connections in Los Angeles area, legend down there. Caleb Williams played at USC for 2 years, so he probably would see Caleb as a savior to the franchise that has been so badly mismanaged by 2 decades of Dan Snyder's ownership. And everybody's just, Chicago is desperate for winners. So is Washington. So we'll definitely be interested to see, if Caleb is maybe leaning towards wanting to be in his hometown, because I think professional athletes at some point would like to play in their home city or hometowns. So, that's just my opinion right now. And, I'm very, very curious to see, how the interview process goes, and if Caleb is or his handlers are already doing some due diligence on both organizations and how they are structured and how they operate, and obviously the history of quarterback development doesn't certainly favor the Chicago Bears in any shape or form right now. What are you worried about the Caleb's mindset and the what I just mentioned about the Bears possibly may not be where his favorite destination is?
Yeah, I'm not too concerned about that. And maybe I'm wrong. I actually just did a podcast today that's not coming out until next week. It's my Caleb Williams episode, though. But I talked to Yogi Roth. He's part of the Pac-12 network and called a ton of USC games. He also coaches Elite 11, so he's known Caleb even back in high school. And he had nothing but good things to say about Caleb Williams when it comes to the type of person he is, his leadership, his loyalty. And he did not mention anything about him possibly not wanting to go to the Bears. He was very vocal about him being able to, because I even mentioned how much our locker room loves Justin Fields and how I have a concern of how you might lose some of the locker room if you trade him away and get a new guy. And he was like, well, Caleb Williams is probably the perfect guy to come in because he's very likable. His teammates love him. His coaches love him. He's one of the hardest workers, first in, last out, but not only just for himself working out, but helping other people in their workouts or getting to know the guys. And he just said that's the type of person he is. So from all of those things, I don't see Caleb being one of the one super diva of, no, I'm going to this place or I'm not coming into the NFL. I also think that it also depends where the Bears value. I mean, they may full on look at Drake May and think he's better. And maybe trade back, let Washington trade up, get a little bit of something out of it, and then take Drake May. Like, there's so many possibilities in this draft that we don't know. And I truly don't think we know which way it's truly going to go until we get to the combine area. And we're seeing these guys in their combine drills and we're hearing the interviews and what's going on in that sense. And that's going to be a bigger sign to me of where maybe the Bears may go and what they think is right. Because I don't think they want to completely blow up the locker room with how well, from what I heard at the end of the season in their exit interviews, the team was very, very vocal about they wanted Justin Fields to stay. And this comes from one of the players on the team. I can't say who because it was off the record, but one of the players on the team told me that they were very vocal. They all went in and was like, we want Justin Fields as our quarterback next year. We don't want you guys to trade. We want to get a wide receiver. Let's help him out. What that means, I don't know. Like, the players aren't making this decision. That's going to be Ryan Poles and the rest of the Bears staff. But that's a little concern for me. And I think they will take a little bit into account of not completely imploding when it comes to that side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I know DJ Moore was kind of hinting that, he's not going to demand trades. And obviously these players, they get emotional. And but at the end of the day, they're professionals and they'll deal with it and move on no matter what happens. But, players aren't dumb. I know Jalen Johnson was on, FS1, and you probably saw the interview and the podcast he did with Keyshawn about, the coaching issues and stuff like that. And, players know that, they can see and smell BS when they see one. And, Luke Getsy, unfortunately, probably got way too much leeway. And it's unfortunate that Matt Eberflus didn't have the balls to, to pull the plug when, things weren't going well. And, judging from the other coaches who was fired, Eberflus certainly didn't have any eye for the coaching talent, especially on the offensive side, unfortunately. So whoever they hire, it's very important because you don't want the locker room to turn on Eberflus, and that Eberflus, I'm sure obviously he's a head coach and he'll have his say on the offensive side, but he has to make sure that the OC that they bring in is not somebody that he can push over, push around, but this time somebody that Eberflus must respect and also give a certain amount of authority when it comes to play calling, because offense has to score in this day and age in the NFL. And Eberflus has to understand, and this is where his conservativeness has to really, really change in this off season, and also moving forward, so that at least he can definitely have some sort of a sustainable success in the NFL if he wants to be a head coach with the Bears moving forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that there's a lot of decisions this offseason that are going to affect things moving forward. But I think that when you look at it, you do want, first of all, he's a defensive guy, and you can't expect a defensive guy to be able to manage too much on the offense. It's just not what it's going to be. When these guys that grew up on the defensive side of the ball and have coached their entire careers on the defensive side of the ball, that's what they're good at. That's why I am glad, from what I'm hearing, that Ryan Poles is having more say in the coaching hiring, because he's an offensive guy. So that definitely helps, because I think maybe last year they let Eberflus just, okay, you're the coach, so you can hire, not thinking about how he is a defensive minded guy, and that's the way that his mind just ticks that way. So I do. That's why I think now we're seeing 9 different guys and all sorts of different levels of the NFL and all sorts of different trees and all of this stuff, because Ryan Poles was like, all right, we're going to have a little more in-depth search this time.
Right. All right, let's on this quick off-season prediction, draft, free agency, coaching staff. Quarterback, Fields or Williams?
Do I think what I think will happen?
Yes.
Okay, I think they'll draft a quarterback.
And that would be Williams?
Yeah, I at this moment I say Williams.
Okay. I you know what? I think I'm gonna lean towards Williams right now. Not because I like him, but I think that's where it's heading.
Yeah.
Fields, where do you think he'll be traded?
I will say Oakland or Atlanta. I think it depends who Oakland hires. If Oakland hires Champ Kelly, I think he's going to go hard after Justin Fields. It depends what happens in Atlanta. I know they're interviewing Belichick. Not sure his feelings towards Justin, if he would even be able to handle a quarterback that runs that type of offense. I'm not sure. So it'll depend on that too. But those are the 2 teams that I think will go to, and I lean towards the Raiders, especially if they hire Champ.
Yeah, Vegas and Falcons for me as well. What do you think the compensation will be? Do you think it's a second round or second and a third round pick? If they offer, would you take it?
I think it would be more like that. I don't think they're getting a first for him. I could see a couple 2s or a 2-3.
Okay. I'm going to predict that the Bears will sign a edge rusher in free agency, and it will be either Bryce Huff of the Jets. That's probably the number 1 guy, probably cheaper than, say, Danielle Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I like that. I haven't fully started looking at his free agents and stuff for them to be able to start working at. I haven't got there yet, but I do think they're going to address the pass rush, and the best way probably to do it, I kind of see them leaning pass rush in the draft, honestly. But I think that also is when I thought they were keeping Fields, because in my head I was thinking wide receiver and edge in the draft, and with their first 2 picks. But that obviously changes if they draft Caleb Williams. So I like that. I think that's a good thing, because they definitely, a veteran pass rusher across from Montez Sweat would definitely ramp things up a little bit. I could see them. I think that for offensive line, they've got to do something, and I know they'll address a little bit of it in the draft too. But you've got Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, Darnell Wright. You've got three guys under 3 years on the offensive line. They do need some sort of veteran there. They tried it with Nate Davis. That did not work. He was injured almost the whole year. But you need some sort of veteran offensive lineman, and I'd have to go through and look at names and see who's available. But I could see them doing something like that, whether it's and the good thing is, with Tevin being so versatile, you could go left guard, right guard, or center with that, and upgrade one of those positions with a veteran guy. So I could see them doing something like that.
Mm-hmm. What about wide receiver? Do you think? I think Mooney's gone. This is a tough one, because if they draft Caleb Williams at 1, they won't draft until the 9th.
Yeah.
And after number 9, they won't even pick in the second round because they gave that away on the Montez Sweat
Montez.
deal, which I think 10 out of 10 times, I think
Do it.
people will do it again.
Yeah.
So if there aren't any receivers at 9, do you think they will draft somebody at 9? I know it's early. Do you think they will trade down and get more picks?
I think,
or is it basically kind of like a contingent on Justin Fields' trade value?
Yeah, that's true, because if they trade down, they're going to get a good haul for trading that number 1 pick. For trading Caleb Williams, you're getting a haul. So that obviously depends. But I think even if not, let's say they draft Caleb or Drake with 1, I still think they would possibly go one of the receivers or Brock Bowers at 9.
Okay. Jalen Johnson, I think he gets tagged, franchise tagged. I think the conversation he had the other day on FS1 with Keyshawn, I think I don't think this is going to turn into a very acrimonious one like we've seen with Roquan.
Yeah.
But it is, I would say on the verge of, maybe becoming one. So I think Ryan Poles has to really, really buckle down and make sure that, he gets paid.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he'll probably get 22, 23. A tag will be 19 point something. He's already said he won't be mad about a tag.
Yeah.
So I think they'd tag him, and then they'd be able to have a little bit more in-depth conversations about the contract rather than having to rush right now and figure out what's going on. So they tag him. He gets almost $20 million this next season, and then and Ryan Poles tells him like, "Hey, we'll have a deal. We'll tag you 1 year. You'll get this much, and then we'll talk during the off season about numbers and where we need to go, because he's one of the best corners in the league. So you're going to need to pay him." And I think they will. I think that Ryan Poles is very smart when it comes to that type of thing. And when it comes to evaluating talent and when it comes to contracts. And I know people were mad about Roquan, but I personally think he did the right thing in that situation. Now that we're looking back, especially now that you see what TJ Edwards and Tremaine were able to do this year. So I think they'll figure it out, but I do think he gets a tag this year.
And finally, it hurts me to say this, but I think Eddie Jackson's time with the Bears is done. I think he will likely be cut to, get more cap space. Who else do you think will be likely to be the surprise cut, or like a player who could be departed by trade or something?
Yeah, that's a good question. You mentioned Darnell Mooney. I also think Mooney will probably be gone. I do think Eddie's also gone. I think that Robert
Whitehair is also done, I think, unfortunately.
Who?
Cody Whitehair. I think he's still on cap, but I think he'll likely be cut, or he might basically said, "I've had enough," and just basically retired too. So
yeah. Cody's decline has been honestly kind of rough to watch, because he was so reliable for a while, and this season there was multiple times I was screaming at the TV to take him out because every snap was going over Justin Fields' head, and you just can't do that. No. And the center position was rough last year. So that's why I think a lot of us immediately are just saying, figure out center.
Exactly.
But yeah, I could see Cody Whitehair gone. I think Robert Tonyan, his time here was short, and that'll be gone. Those are a few of the guys that first pop in my head. I'm trying to go through like the roster and think. I don't think it'll be interesting, but I think that Deontay Foreman's gone.
Justin Jones is going to be an interesting decision too,
That is, yeah. And honestly, Justin Jones had a rough start, but started looking way better once everybody else started kind of clicking. But the way the defensive line improved, you almost don't want to touch it too much other than adding an edge and obviously a little bit of depth. But the way they were able to, DeMarcus Walker will be an interesting one, because he also, once they were able to kind of switch things around, once they got Montez Sweat and they could move Walker around, and Jan was playing on one side, they could move Walker on the inside, and then he would play outside, and you saw some success from him from that. So the Billings, Walker, Sweat, Dexter was kind of fun to watch towards the end of the season. So you almost don't want to touch it too much in Justin Jones.
Well, Taylor, thanks for your time tonight, and I highly encourage everybody to follow Taylor's work on X at Taylor Dole 1010XL. She's going to be very, very busy with the not only with her work at the radio station down in Jacksonville, but she is also a big-time contributor on the Windy City Gridiron SB Nation's page. And what do you have any interesting stuff that you're working on that you wouldn't mind sharing? You have something you cooking up later?
Yeah. So actually, the series I'm doing right now is a series based on if the Bears draft a quarterback. So tomorrow morning, an episode will drop on Drake May. I talked to Adam Lucas. He is a Tar Heels writer and podcaster. So he's covered Drake May through his career at UNC. He joins me. But then in addition to that, I talked to somebody from Draft Network to kind of get his opinion on their scouting report on Drake May. We also get into some of the other possible quarterbacks and what that looks like in addition to Caleb Williams. It was fun though. So that one comes out in the morning, and obviously being a UNC guy, he is also familiar with Trubisky. So we talk a little bit of Mitch in there. But that one drops tomorrow, and then next Friday will be my Caleb Williams episode. So those are this week and next, some fun stuff. If we do go quarterback, if you guys want to know more about the potential quarterbacks that could be on the Bears, it's a way to go.
Absolutely. Taylor, thanks for your time tonight, and look forward to staying in touch with you in the off season. It's going to be a very interesting and probably the most important off season in the Bears history.
Yeah.
And look forward to staying in touch and tap into your contacts. Maybe if I want to, expand my interview list this off season. So thank you very much, and I hope to have you again very, very soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much.